Welcome to the Centre for Legal Leadership and to Financial CrimeCast. I'm Sam Tate, Head of White Collar Crime and Compliance at the law firm RPC. And in this series, we have the pleasure of speaking with leaders in the field of financial crime, compliance and ethics to discuss their experiences, what they've learned in their career, and what financial crime issues they see on the horizon. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by James Walker. James is Group Head of Ethics and Compliance at Compass Group, which is a constituent of the FTSE 100 and also a Fortune Global 500 company. James, thank you very much for joining us on Financial CrimeCast.
Thank you very much, Sam.
So I'm going to start with this question, and it's just going back to your roots, your career, and I wonder if you could just talk through your career so far.
Yeah, happy to. It's great. I like to say that you should draw upon the original passions that you may first have had as something that you do in your career. So for me, that was studying ethics and philosophy at university. And had really enjoyed delving into some of these deeper issues about why do good people do bad things, and what motivates people to break the law, and how do you ensure that laws are remain effective. So I went into a legal practice and a legal profession on both sides of the pond, as it were. So because as you might hear, I'm maybe not from around these parts, as you say, because I'm originally from Alabama. So, but have found my way to living and working in the UK for the last 8 or 9 years.
And I wonder if you could talk about the moves that you've made. So, you start off, I think I'm right, in private practice, working in financial crime for a range of things, and then you make this move in-house. I'm sure many people will be thinking about how you did that, and then how you kind of move up to become like a global head of compliance.
Yeah, great. So professionally, I started out working for a large American law firm in Washington, D.C., which is in their sort of white collar crime investigations practice group. And that offers you a lot of experience, working on fraud cases, FCPA bribery cases, and corruption cases, that you can get stuck into. And then I started working for another large American law firm here in London on sanctions and large sanctions cases. My last case in private practice was a BNP Paribas sanctions, OFAC sanctions case. Which, it's hard to say that was a really good thing when your client winds up paying, one of the largest fines in OFAC history, but it was a really good case to have worked on and to seen in the detail. But when you start to work on these kinds of cases, you start to identify lots of patterns. You start to see certain root cause analysis. Your job as outside counsel is to figure out the story. What happened? When did it happen? How did it happen? Who knew about it? And the more you look at these things, you start to see some commonalities around, well, if only someone had listened to that, concern that was raised by, someone who was leaving the business from finance. If only, the whistleblower, complaint that had come through had been dealt with, more effectively, or connected back to another issue, then you wouldn't be in this horrible place that you are, now, having to engage outside counsel, having to engage, forensic accountants, forensic technology firms to do all of this reason. You start to see that, the truth of compliance will always be cheaper than non-compliance. How can you stop some of this stuff from happening in the first place, and build a system of controls and build a culture of compliance that will prevent or detect the kinds of misconduct that are happening. So I became really interested in that part of the work and the remediation part And that is, usually that as outside counsel is where you were sort of handing it back over to your clients, and it's no longer yours to sort of fix. And, you're just kind of saying, here's the things that we've identified that you should be doing. Now it's up to them to do it. Sometimes clients will say, yeah, it's just too expensive. That's not what we want to do. Or we'll do it next year, or we'll put it in our 5-year plan. So you have to let it go. And I was like, well, that's the part I really want to do. So I left private practice and was brought into Tesco to help create their first, anti-bribery and corruption and compliance program from scratch. We'd done a lot of little bits and different things, but it had not really been unified in an overarching and serious way. That was, of course, unfortunately, about 9 months before we had our huge SFO investigation. But we we were able to use these things to build our global compliance program out. So I drafted their first anti-bribery and corruption policy. I helped create the first code of conduct for Tesco and implement their first due diligence platform or process. So from there, you just sort of you really get a sense of how to structure and engage in some of these things that leverage all the the best parts and the most interesting parts of both what you do and from a legal background, but also across all of the other areas that you enjoy in terms of engaging with different stakeholders and looking at change management and making a difference in the culture of the company.
Thank you. I mean, it's really interesting. And I definitely see the connections here between the financial crime kind of black letter law and the remediation side. And that's definitely got stronger over time. But it does take someone who's interested in a holistic approach to bring those two things together. I think prevention is better than cure, and it's annoying when you see the same matters coming up again and again. If only we'd actually implemented X or Y thing, and must be extremely frustrating for prosecutors as well. And that reference to BNP and Swift payments was something, not particularly at BNP, but something that they saw again and again and again.
Yeah.
So thank you for kind of talking through those bits of your career and your observations. I wondered if from that there was any advice you would give to your younger self as you kind of started out on your career.
Yeah, it's a great question. I for personally, I think what are the skill sets that you need to be as a compliance officer in today's world to manage this broad array of issues is that I wish I would tell myself to go back and do a proper project management course. So that I could be the one doing Gantt charts and helping map out everything. I rely heavily on those much better than I to do that. But it is such an essential part of a compliance officer's role to be able to deliver very complex plans and activities across an organization. We have large organizations like Compass with over 500,000 employees globally. Or Tesco, had 300,000 employees globally, and you're talking about 50 countries. It becomes incredibly complex to try to land something and deliver it, across all of those different jurisdictions, markets, and different people's roles and lives. So project management is a real must that I would encourage everyone either to, even if you don't know how to do it, learn how other people do it so that you can at least ensure that they are delivering to the plans that you need them to do.
And is there anything else that you might take your younger self aside and say, look, here are another couple of things that you're going to need on your way?
Yeah, well, the first one would be to go at the earliest moment and buy a whole bunch of Bitcoin and set up some Bitcoin, mining farms so that I could retire early. That would be a definite one too.
I'd be advising myself to do the same.
Yeah, but more seriously, what I think my younger self would benefit from is learning about those soft leadership skills, not being afraid to push those types of skills out when you make that transition, whether it's in private practice, whether it's in-house and you're working, as you transition from, let's say, being a subject matter expert in a particular topic or subject or area, you then move into start managing teams and groups of people, and you need to no longer be the one doing the work and rolling your sleeves up. You need to deliver through other people, and take those people with you and develop teams. That skill set, that capability is so important. To have to craft and mold a team of people that you can bring the best out of them. Those leadership qualities are really important and start to become more important than being able to identify the wrong field 56 in a Swift payment. And that is not, you're not going to get praised for spending a whole bunch of time on something super granular. You have to be able to enable other people to succeed for you on your behalf. So that I think is something that my younger self could do with is like, don't try to overmanage something, and don't be afraid to push those leadership skills.
Yeah, thank you. It's always struck me that you ought to try and recruit people in the team better than yourself. They won't have the same experience, but they can be great, and then encourage them, empower them to kind of reach. I mean, it sounds like a platitude, to reach their potential, but that's what I mean.
And, Abraham Lincoln had a thing where he said he wanted to create a team of rivals, people that were people that challenged him to be president or something, and he put them in his cabinet. So it's like take people that are as good as you are, or could be a rival to you and a successor to you, who will deliver as well as you can.
It's a lot more fun working in those kind of environments with those kind of groups. If you've got that, it makes your job more enjoyable. It makes it easier, but it makes it better as well. If we now turn to kind of substance, financial crime, ethics, and compliance, I wondered what you thought were the current trends in financial crime and compliance.
Yeah, I mean, starting with the wider sort of compliance piece, I'm seeing a very interesting convergence with the ESG, the environment, sustainability, and governance, and the attention that the ESG agenda is starting to receive from investors, from the financial community. And the importance that is being placed on it. So financial crime compliance has a strong role to play in the G and the shape of what that overarching compliance structure has, but it also has a place to play within the E and the S, I think. And I would say that when you start out more narrowly looking at things like modern slavery, modern slavery is a financial crime. As I said before, maybe that Kevin Hyland, who's the UK's first commissioner for modern slavery, would always say you can't have modern slavery without some form of corruption. So there had to be fraud involved. There had to be bribery involved to get people over the border that were illegal workers that shouldn't be there. They're bribing an inspector in your facilities so that the working hours or working conditions are overlooked and you don't have visibility of them. So if you look at that route and the engagement and the attention that is receiving on a regular basis. I mean, I have calls with some of our investors in the investor community about what are you doing in this space for modern slavery but also for the wider ESG agenda, and they want to know. It's not good enough to just say, well, no one's reported any instances of modern slavery to us. And it's like, okay, well, if that's the case, then where is it really, and how confident are you that your controls are sufficient to prevent and detect any of these kinds of things? So to me, I think that's a real emerging area that is crossing over a number of areas, but it's also an opportunity for compliance officers or people that are more narrowly within financial crime to start to look at how can you leverage some of these things to push the wider agenda of your company. And get involved in not just, let's say, the due diligence process for third parties and riskier third parties, but, the due diligence process for riskier third parties and whether they meet, the kind of ESG side of sharing your values and your approach to some of these topics. It's not going to go away. It's only increasing. TCFD reporting is going to become a mandatory component, for listed companies in the UK in the next year, which will have to talk about, the risks of climate change to your business. And so what kind of those, how do you insert yourself into those conversations around what those risks are and the impacts of those, and where those risks arise. There will also be the potential that there are financial crime risks associated with those, like water scarcity, and shortages will lead to more disputes, more turmoil, political upheaval. So it's something that, to get inserted into those conversations and have some thought, or to receive the thought of your colleagues in that place is quite useful, I think.
Thank you. And it's very interesting to know that investors are asking those kind of searching questions.
Yeah, it's a very hot button topic. And another one that I do see is, on the technology side, the increasingly, the more complex some of these things are, the more you need to be a technologist, the more you need to leverage types of technology, whether that's artificial intelligence to be able to scan your third parties, which has been, well put in place, for a number of years, but across a number of broader things. I do joke sometimes to say that, it's hard to argue that you have a continuous improvement program for any form of compliance, financial crime compliance, and if you're still doing everything, using Excel spreadsheets and treating all of your systems and databases as an Excel spreadsheet. That's not continuous improvement. You've got to find a way to automate that, to make it better, to use your data analytics, and to be pushing and leveraging that. Is something that I do see as an important emerging sort of trend.
We certainly see clients who are trying to organize their compliance programs using Excel spreadsheets and sticky tape. And so it's difficult. Look, it's harder to do than putting in a program. And of course, you don't get the management information out that you need from those Excel spreadsheets to make better informed decisions. But also, I suppose they're partly just responding to the guidance in relation to the Bribery Act, for instance, which doesn't in fact mention computers. So it's almost like it was written in the 1970s and not 2010, but it now seems really quite out of date when it comes to how people structure their compliance programs and all the underlying tech. And I certainly hope that when they get around to updating that guidance, they'll kind of remember that compliance programs are built on technology now.
Yes.
One of the things you talked about towards the beginning of our discussion was good people doing bad things. And, you're being pulled into this area with a real passion around philosophy and ethics. I know that you've got an interest in behavioral psychology, and I wondered if you might talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I do believe that behavioral science, the behavioral sciences, behavioral psychology is becoming an increasing area of importance and a trend. And so how do you either most simply just nudge people to do the thing that you want them to do, or how do you prevent people in the aggregate from doing something you don't want them to do? Follow your compliance policies, don't break the law. And doing it is just, more and more and more has become, a key piece of the compliance sort of agenda and area. And, I really think the more analysis and time you can spend going through, whether it's wherever you are on that journey, it is time well spent, to go back and look at some of the people like Dan Ariely, and the works that he's done to help kind of shape some of your thinking. it is so important for organizations, because how do you know what you're doing is going to be effective? How can you make sure that if you want to get a large group of disparate people to do the thing that you want them to do, there's a lot of valuable insights and things in there in terms of framing different things in terms of doing it. So I know from my peers that have a bit more resources in the pharmaceutical areas, they have engaged behavioral scientists to give them that support and really help inform some of the activities that they're doing. So it's not good enough to just say, well, we launched training to X amount of people, 25,000 people. We told them all to do this piece of training, and we're telling them to do it, but there's 5 to 10% that just never seem to do it. And no matter what we do, we have to kick them and push them and yell at them and beat them up or threaten to take all their toys away until they do complete it. And you're like, well, okay, what does that say? Like, what does that really inform you about the population of people that you're trying to do? And can you be smarter about who these people are? What does it mean nothing in their role, and you've got the scoping of your engagement wrong, and you're just trying to ask people to do something they don't see any value or merit in? You need to dig deeper into the understandings of how you can connect and engage with people. And behavioral sciences offer you a wonderful lens, and behavioral psychology a wonderful lens of understanding that from a macro level. What are the incentives? What are the obstacles and the barriers that people have to do something?
And then finally, and going slightly off script from our questions, James, but trying not to fill you with dread. One of the things I think stands out around your career is just the variety of companies that you've helped. So we've talked around banks, but fast-moving consumable goods, retail space. Engineering, I know, has been part of your career as well, and kind of the catering and so on, which of course is on hospitality. Thank you. Looking across that, is it that you can apply the same compliance program no matter what the industry, or have you found that different industries respond differently to the program which is being implemented?
Yeah, well, thanks for that. It is a good question. I always like to say, human risk is human risk at its ultimate level, and really what you need to do is to figure out what are the particular drivers for your, whether you're selling widgets, making widgets, marketing, widgets. That to me, that's irrespective. It's about the culture of the company, the people that are there, and the levers that you have to get them to do something or not do something. So for me, I always find I love that idea of being able to just, pick up any type of industry, any type of sector, and say, well, you could apply these rules, these things within it. There will be technical elements of that, for sure. Within the pharmaceutical industry is different from the oil and gas industry, but at the highest level, it's about getting people to comply with a set of rules and expectations, and you need to be able to communicate that to them. So that's, to me, is the key, is sort of unlocking what are those tools to get people to do it, and that is almost universal. As you say, and you find, the weaknesses, the motivations to accept a bribe or to not turn down a bribe when it's offered will be the same within oil and gas. It will be in chemicals, pharmaceuticals, fast-moving goods, as you say, retail, hospitality, whatever it might be. These are things that are issues that will present themselves in a very, very similar way, and you can advise companies to avoid or mitigate those types of problems. I always say, no matter what the thing is, it's like the best way to have a great compliance program and to prevent financial crimes is just hire really ethical people, and then you don't have any problems ever, right? Your job is done. You just need to sit back and put your feet up. Because those ethical people will always do the right thing. If something happens, they'll speak up and raise a concern, and they'll follow all of your policies and procedures. That's the job, is just to make sure that the company's hiring process is the best possible, so that we never fall afoul of anything, or do something wrong. Keep your employees safe, and your company will be safe too.
So that sounds like a very good point to end on. Thank you very much, James. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I've really enjoyed the points you've made. Thank you for taking us through your career, your advice to your younger self. I certainly do wish I'd gone and bought some Bitcoin, for talking to us about compliance trends, technology, behavioral psychology, and the differences or lack of them in applying compliance and ethics to different industries. So thank you very much. As I say, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you, Sam.
It was always a pleasure.